In the name of God, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. Good morning. Please be seated. Well, I have to tell you, I just got fired up. If I wasn't already feeling it, I am now. Right in the middle of that gospel reading, somebody in the choir back there let out a really loud yawn. So that got me fired up. I mean, they were excited to be here, and they were feeling the moment. I could tell. I'm ready to go now. Anyway, this is great. We are in, just a reminder, those of you who were not here last week, we are in stewardship season. We're always in stewardship at Christ Church or in the life of the church. We're always being challenged to wonder how well we are doing at sort of managing all that God has trusted to us. And maybe that's the problem, is that we're managing it a little too much. Maybe. This story this morning in the gospel this morning, the story of the wicked tenants, is really a great story for stewardship because it challenges us to kind of look at those first century religious leaders and see in them some of the same things that keep us from realizing our fruitfulness. Because that's how that gospel closes this morning. Look, if you can't be fruitful, if I can't trust you with all that I need you to be, if I can't trust you to be faithful with what I've entrusted to you, to share with others, to be a blessing to others, then I'll give it to somebody else. That's how the story goes this morning. There's nothing inherently wicked about the tenants, about the religious leaders. There's nothing inherently wicked about them. I think they started out in their relationship with God and with the people around them well-intended. They were good people. There's nothing to suggest that they're bad people. They've just lost their way. They've lost their way, and that's what this story is about. God entrusts this extraordinary kingdom to them. Certainly in this world, it was a land flowing with milk and honey, right? It was a promised land full of potential and hope for the world, right? And so in this parable this morning, you get the whole of salvation history. See, it's almost like they built a wall around this land, and they were in control about who came in and who went out. They began to take charge. They were struggling for ownership and control of it. They wanted to be the ones to really manage and to hold on tightly to this precious gift that God had given to them. Oh, God kept sending the prophets. That's the servants in this morning's allegory. God kept sending the prophets, and they killed the prophets, and He sent other prophets, and they killed them because, God, thank you for what you've given us, but we'll take it from here. Sound familiar? This is not a story about first century Christians. This is the story of my life and yours. Thank you for all you've given me, and I know that your prophets come to me from week to week, and your religious leaders try desperately to call us into faithfulness and fruitfulness. But if you don't mind, I appreciate what you've done. I appreciate what you've given and entrusted to me. I appreciate all the blessings of my life, but I'll take it from here. It was really upsetting to God. He even sends His Son, of course, right? Sends His Son into the world to try to get their attention and to call them home, back to faithful living, to be true and good to what God had given to them. They even killed the Son, right? That's the story. I mean, we even killed the Son. And so what this story is all about is a people who want to take charge. They want to hold it tightly. It's mine. It's mine to do with it what I want. And in listening to, and then, of course, that's where the wickedness seeps in. The more that you believe it really is yours, and you forget that life and all that I have is a blessing from afar. The more you get away from that place, the more the wickedness creeps in. This morning, Jesus is saying to us, I don't so much need a people who need to take charge and control and run the show. I need a people who are willing to be fruitful, good stewards, good managers, faithful managers of all that I've entrusted to them, all that I have blessed them with for the sake of the world, for the sake of the world. So I kept thinking about this word fruitful that the writer uses this morning, and I thought about my grandmother. She, as you all, many of you know by now, I spent years living with my grandparents, and we had this little house. If you're going southwest of Palatka, sort of heading down through the Ocala Forest, we had a little house out there, and as I've said to you before, it was just a little house, and it was surrounded by pastures and forests, and it was the best place in the world to grow up. There was no better place in the world to grow up. Just amazing, magical place to grow up. You could get in all kind of trouble out there, and nobody knew about it. It was just, you know what I mean? It was just great. And the little old house, but that was okay because my grandmother didn't care about the house. Second to her family, she cherished her family, but what she really loved and where she experienced God's presence in her life was in her yard. She loved her yard. Man, she could work wonders with those flowers, those flowering plants. She was just amazing. In fact, you're not going to believe this. Her yard was in Southern Living back 45 years ago. I don't know. It was a long, long time ago. I just remember there was a little picture of her yard in Southern Living in one of the issues. And I don't know how in the world anybody found out about it. It was just like this little oasis out there in the middle of the forest that we had. But what I most remember wasn't so much the flowering plants, it was her fruit trees. My gosh, she loved those fruit trees. But they weren't, I think that this is where I think I began to learn about stewardship and about how to be in a right relationship with all the blessings of my life and all that God has entrusted to me. For my grandmother, that yard was a gift to her to hold and to take care of for the sake of something greater. Of course, she had all those flowering plants, and she was always making arrangements and taking the arrangements to somebody else. She was always sharing the flowers, or she was cutting off pieces, and she was growing plants and potting them, and she was taking those as gifts to other people, and she just had this magical ability. She was in such an extraordinary relationship with the Creator through the created. But what I most remembered were the fruit trees. This past week, I kept thinking about all the fruit trees in this little yard. We had oranges and satsumas, and we had grapefruits, and we had kumquats, and I think we had all kind of stuff. I don't remember all the fruit trees, but she had a lot of fruit trees around the yard, and she just loved those things. She cared for them. She pruned them. She kept the moisture right in the ground. She just knew how to love them into realizing their potential. And you know what I remembered is that the fruit trees, the fruit was always low-hanging. It was full and low-hanging. It was heavy. But every year, what she found the most joy in was pulling all that fruit off those trees, and she'd throw them in baskets, and she'd go deliver the fruit to her friends and neighbors and folks around town, or just anybody that needed to taste something that had the power to lift them up into a new place. That was her joy. That was her joy in life. It was a way for her. It wasn't hers to hold on to and hoard. It was hers to share with the people around her. And the more I thought about that, I thought, that's what we're called to be. We who are the tenants of all that God has entrusted to us. The challenge for you and for me is not to hold it and hoard it and control it and manipulate it and to struggle for ownership of it. It becomes gift. It becomes gift to me when I learn to be fruitful in my spirit, to give it away for the sake of the world around us. That's the life of Christ Church. That's what I realized this past week. We're like these low-hanging fruit trees. And the fruit is so available. It's so rich and plentiful and available for the whole world around us, and we just love giving it away. We just love giving it away. Last week, Tom talked about our ministries up in the Jackson Beach area, and you all know the stories. We've founded several of those relief agencies up there. We are tremendous, huge givers to those relief agencies up there. We've even just hired a new person to help us manage those, helping families build bridges between the families who need help and those relief agencies, and just extraordinary work going on, cutting-edge stuff. This week, they asked me to think a little bit more about what we're doing with other Episcopal churches across North Florida. And that's what you have in your bulletin today. Speaking of low-hanging fruit, what a joy, and this is what I contend. I contend that most of us at Christ Church don't have a clue what we're making happen. Not really. You don't really know all the things that we're doing, that you're doing every week, do you? But here it is, some of the things we listed in the bulletin this morning. In that first article in your bulletin, you'll learn, and by the way, there's a wonderful story in there from, a letter from Bob Marsh, not Morris, Bob Marsh, who is the rector of the rector of St. Mark's down in Palatka. And of course, Christ Church, we have been, our clergy leadership, some of our lay leaders, some of you who have special abilities, have been involved in those ministries down in Putnam County over the past year. You can read Bob's letter later. Please don't read it now. It is a great, great letter that really captures a lot of what we've been doing. That's one face of it. There are lots of churches down around the river region that are struggling for life. You all have been down there through us and through each other over the past couple of years. Extraordinary things going on. A whole new direction in ministry down there that Bob shares in the bulletin today. But what I want to call your attention to are those things in that first article. It was Ronnie Willer, Mother Ronnie, they're down in the Fruit Cove area, St. Patrick's. It's a smaller church, and she called a couple of years ago and said, hey, I have a vision for ministry. We're experiencing growth, but I need some help. I've got this amazing musical person, and what I have a vision for using this person, if I could get him for more hours, I could bring more children into the church and their families will follow. And I said, well, what do you need? And she said, this is what I need. Can you give me a grant? And so a couple of years ago, we granted her some money last year and this year. And what you have on the front of your bulletin is a little bit of the face of that ministry that's growing in that church. And she's so proud of it. And it's making such a difference down there in that Southern Mandarin area. Just such a difference in her church. Then you can read about the next article, Father Hugh Chapman. Hugh is a great guy. Father Hugh leads St. Philip's Episcopal Church, which is down around the downtown Jacksonville area. They have an extraordinary ministry to the homeless. But anyway, he came to us last year and said, you know what? We've got a lot of folks that can't get to church on their own. Can you help us? And so we looked out in the parking lot and saw this bus that we weren't using very much. And we said, take that bus right there. And then he called us low-hanging fruit. Not thinking, well, we might need it a few months from now, or what's the value in that bus? What could I get out of that? Take that bus. Just take it. Then, of course, he calls me last week and says, guess what? And I said, what? He said, well, the AC broke. And I said, am I going to have to take care of the bus too? Am I going to be maintaining the bus for you for how long? And I said, how much? And he said, $1,100. And I said, it's done. It'll be done. Just get them to fix it. We'll pay for it tomorrow. That's your money. It's low-hanging fruit. Church of San Lucas, primarily Hispanic community over around JU, St. Luke's area, called a couple weeks ago and said, we're in a crisis situation. We are growing. We're experiencing growth with this Hispanic community and service. And he said, we've lost our air conditioning. Go get that unit replaced. We'll take care of it tomorrow. Low-hanging fruit. We know who we are. We know what we're capable of here. We don't look for reasons not to do what we should be doing. We're faithful with what God has entrusted to us, and we keep giving it away. We keep giving it away for the sake of the kingdom. We believe that when we're true to this God who has entrusted so much to us, that this God will be true to us, will continue to bless us, and move the people of Christ Church to be faithful in their stewardship. Faithful in their stewardship. When you make that pledge in a couple of weeks, what I need you to think about is the fact that we have this enormous potential. We haven't even begun to tap into it because too many of us are still very cautious, safe, holding, and hoarding. You're listening to a person who has given much away. So I'm not bothered at all at telling you that that's where life is. That's how we find life. That's how we tap into the Spirit of the living God. And I'm going to challenge you every year to learn to be faithful with what God has blessed you with. And the more that you become low-hanging fruit in your life, in your home, the more you think that way, and you don't give cautiously or safely or guardedly or just from the leftovers after we've gotten everything we need, God, we'll take it from here. That's when your life begins to change. The life of your family begins to change. Your relationships at home begin to change. You begin to tap into a power, a force of love, extraordinary love and grace. It doesn't matter how much you have. It's being faithful with what you have. It's about being true to the God who has entrusted so much to me and to you. So I'm excited to be at Christ Church because these are just a few stories. Can you imagine what it's like to be the rector of Christ Church and to be in touch with all the stories every day of things that you all are doing to help others? You who are so willing to be low-hanging fruit in the lives of others, a blessing to others, an encouragement to others. Can you imagine what that feels like? This morning I'm reminding you that that's who we are. That's what we're called to be. We can make a difference in ways that very few churches can. And God expects us to make a difference. God expects us to make an impression. And we do that when you're faithful in your pledging, faithful in your giving. When you do that, you empower us to do more than we ever dreamed possible. To become a blessing, a great, great, and extraordinary blessing to the world. Thank you for your generosity, Christ Church. Amen.